Hey everyone, this is Rahul with the Alternative Investors Hangout, and today we have a returning guest. He is Don H. Don, long time no talk, man.
Yeah, it's been a while. What's up, Rahul?
Nothing much, just being busy with being married and all that fun stuff. What about you?
Same thing.
All
Being married, and all that fun stuff.
right, over the past month, we've seen this parabolic move in Bitcoin, and it just seems reminiscent of what happened with gold and silver in 2011, but it just seems that Bitcoin has outdone silver and gold. So, what are your thoughts about this Bitcoin move? I know we're talking off air, but I think you should share some of the things that you told me before we started recording.
Yeah, well, I think that first of all, it needs to be said that anybody who bought bitcoins and held until 5 minutes ago is a genius. Either that or very lucky, or both, or whatever. To see the move that's happened on Bitcoin from inception until now is it's just totally surreal. And I mean, I know that there are people who have been talking about Bitcoin for a very long time, and you got to give those folks credit for getting that call right. So that's the first thing. The second thing I'd say is what concerns me about the move we've seen recently is that the transaction volume on Bitcoin is basically flat over the last year, and yet price just continues to surge higher, or at least the price in dollars. And I look at other markets historically that make these sorts of moves, and they're generally markets where you don't have an ability to short, and where you've got a low volume of trading going on. And I think of markets over in China, for example, where you really can't sell easily. You can certainly buy, and they can just continue to lift the ask on a stock, and it can rise. But you don't have to have a lot of new buyers coming in. You just have to have buyers who don't mind stepping up the bid. So while that happens, it takes almost nothing to hammer the price back down. And you can see over the last few days here, Bitcoin went from nearly 17,000 to 12,700. And that sort of move is because there's not a lot of support buying. And I'm just concerned that when the real dumb money comes in, you're going to see a lot of people buy Bitcoins at prices which are just maybe even higher than they are now. And then when the folks with a lot of Bitcoins on the sidelines that are waiting for their moment to sell come in, they could take out the bid all the way down to 1,000 if they wanted to and still clean up like bandits. So I don't know. It's just very difficult to get a handle on something that is so unusual in its movements like Bitcoin.
So tonight, we're going to see the SIBO introduce Bitcoin futures. I mean, yes, this is going to be pretty much restricted to people that have a lot of money because you have to put down, 45% or 44% based on what I heard on Friday. So do you think that this will have any impact on Bitcoin itself? Because now you're having futures, people could hedge in these markets, and then in a few weeks you're going to have the CME launch futures, and then eventually they're probably going to launch options as long as it doesn't become a nightmare for the exchanges.
Yeah, but if you don't mind, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what effect this is going to have. I can argue it'll have an effect on prices driving it lower, higher. I mean, knowing which direction price will go based on this is hard. But one thing I do find astounding is that the conversations of Bitcoin being money or for the little guy or the bane of the bankster, all of that's just gone. I mean, this is completely gone. If you're now talking about something which Wall Street loves and can't wait to make money on in the same way they've made money on everything else by floating paper around it that has really nothing to do with the thing itself. And, I'm just astounded at all the people, all the Bitcoiners who love this idea. I mean, Bitcoin went from being this philosophical darling of the libertarian, anti-Wall Street, going to be the money for the little guy and all that, and now it's literally going to be a ping pong for Wall Street. Am I the only person listening right now who finds that to be surreal in any way?
Yeah, I mean, you're making great points about that. I remember Bitcoin just talked about on these conspiratorial YouTube channels that you used to watch and I used to follow. And now, for some reason, I'm seeing it all over, like social media. I see people saying that if you're not trading in cryptos, you're losing out on a lot. And I've said this before, my wife, she has a lot of friends, and some of her friends are now coming to her saying, like, hey, what do you think about this Bitcoin? When 3, 4 years ago, the only people that knew about Bitcoin were weird, eccentric people like me and the libertarians on YouTube land, and maybe Zero Hedge that covered it. There are a few other sites that covered it as well, but it's just so weird. And now Bloomberg radio that I listen to on occasion, like every time I go to it, they talk about Bitcoin, Bitcoin, Bitcoin. Max Kaiser is being interviewed, or he was interviewed on the Alex Jones show, and he rarely comes on now. And Alex Jones saying, how do I get involved in Bitcoin, right? And Max Kaiser was, yeah, he started out at the beginning talking about it, but he seems to be interviewed a lot more when the price has gone bonkers. And he was just interviewed on Kitco the other day regarding Bitcoin. So it's just insane. And now you have Bitcoin futures coming up in what, right now, in 3 hours, and then CME in 2 weeks. It's just insane.
Well, you make a great point when you talk about the people who are now talking about Bitcoin. I can tell you that I haven't had anybody talk to me about Bitcoin in the real world until the last couple months. And it's all people asking, where can I get some? Should I invest in them? What do you think, etc. And it's very odd seeing people talk about something up 6,000% in the last year, and suddenly they're interested. And it's not like you and I weren't talking about it. I've been talking about this. I mean, I have people that I know personally. I've been talking about since Bitcoin was at about 10. And they had no interest in talking about it, learning about it, investing, buying, selling, having any conversations, but now they want some. And, I don't know if that's a sign of a top, or I don't know what's the sign of, other than I'm always concerned when, the guy mowing my yard wants to pick something up that he could have bought literally, a month ago, 50% lower, a year ago, 5,900% lower. And now people around are talking about it. There's also been an interesting explosion if you go online and you see ads everywhere for all of the next Bitcoin. I'm sure you've seen these ads everywhere you go. There's ads of the next crypto, the next Bitcoin, the next great investment opportunity. It is literally everywhere. And this gives me pause to wonder when government regulation comes in and says, okay, the Wild West is over. And when that happens, there's going to be a screeching halt to all of this. And I don't know where it's going to be. I mean, I don't know what the top is. I don't know what the bottom is. But there is a day of reckoning coming when that's going to all stop. How and when, I don't know. But your point is well taken. When everyone around you is asking about something they didn't care about, literally 5,900% lower, there's probably you're getting close to a sell.
Indeed. What do you think about this blockchain technology? Do you think that what we're seeing right now is reminiscent of the internet bubble, where we remember that AOL and Yahoo were the darlings of the tech bubble, and now AOL is irrelevant. Yahoo is also irrelevant. Now we have Google, the number one internet search engine. You don't even have Alta Vista now. And fast forward to right now with Bitcoin, with Litecoin, and a few other Bitcoins. Do you think that these will fade away, but then something else that comes out of it after this whole bubble burst?
Well, I don't know. Is blockchain technology like laser discs in the 1970s, or Betamax tapes in the 1970s or 80s, or is it more like the internet, like you're talking about, where it's the foundation for something, not just a thing in and of itself? I'm not smart enough. I'm not technologically savvy enough to know. I know this much. I wouldn't bet against it. I think we're way too early in the cycle to start deciding what it is not going to be. So I think it's going to be interesting to watch how people use it. I have concerns as a libertarian about its uses. I have concerns about linking everything together, literally transaction to transaction. I think there's a concern that people should have about that. I just wonder how people would feel if they went to the grocery store and they bought a sack of groceries with a $100 bill, and they had to give an account for where they got that $100 bill from, who used it before them, and then they also had to make sure they knew where it went after them and it wasn't used in some nefarious purposes, and that they might be caught in the middle of a sandwich of two bad actors and now they've got to explain how they got that $100 bill. I wonder if people have thought these things through with respect to cryptocurrencies, and I don't think they have. So I think the future's unknown. It'll be interesting, and I think the downside is going to be just as dramatic as the potential upside.
So before I end this podcast, do you have anything else to say about Bitcoin?
No, not really. I mean, I wish I'd have bought some at a dime and held it until now. But
yeah, you'd be retired by now. I'd be retired by now.
Yeah. By the way, now you're bringing a good point there. Let me say this not just to be funny. There's a lot of folks out there that are talking about Bitcoin, and they've been pounding the table for a very long time about it. And a lot of the folks talking about it do so with a profit motive in mind. And I won't name anybody particular, but you can certainly think of the names I'm talking about. So with people out there still talking about Bitcoin and promoting it, where are the videos of the guys having a big going away party where they say, you know what, I was telling you, and thank you for all of your patronage over the years, but I'm done talking about this because I just bought an island. Remember how I told you to buy Bitcoins? Well, I was doing nothing but that, and I've been buying since zero. I've never sold because I told you never to sell. But now that I literally have $100 billion in my bank account, I'm out of here. Where are those people? They're not. You don't see those people. You see a lot of people out there still pumping Bitcoin. That tells me even their belief has not been strong enough. Now, there may be people who have done this, and I'm not saying they're not all, or I'm not saying there aren't some people that are altruistic and are interested in helping the little guy. But I just wonder where all the Bitcoin billionaires are. There should be. Rahul, you see a lot of these guys on YouTube, and I do too. We've seen them for years. Where are the parties? Where are the videos? Because I can promise you, if I had bought Bitcoin anywhere south of $100 and I'd have put even $1,000 in them, I would be done talking about Bitcoins. I'd be reaping the rewards and living on an island somewhere. But you don't see that. So that kind of tells me that even the folks who are big believers in Bitcoin certainly haven't held to this point. That's okay. I'm not faulting them for it. I'm just saying that if anyone listening right now is like, man, I sure wish I'd have bought at 100 or 10 or whatever, you wouldn't have held this long anyway. Nobody would have. And what you're seeing right now, if we had a longer time to talk about it, we could talk structurally about what's happening with price. But there's very few people out there that are riding this thing to the top. So don't feel bad if you missed the boat. You and about 99.9% of everybody else. By the way, one other thing. The reason I didn't get into them early was I was afraid of what the government would say about them. I mean, who knew? I mean, I guess if we were really forward thinking, we could have figured this out. But who knew the government would love them to this point, right? Who knew? So anyway, I guess congratulations to people like DaVinci J15, who I want to mention specifically because that guy was in the early days talking about him. And for the rest of us, I guess we'll have to wait for our next Bitcoin opportunity, which, by the way, may not happen again in our lifetimes.
I mean, who knows? I mean, there's more opportunities with Bitcoins now. I mean, if you're a savvy trader, who knows? You could still make quite a bit on it.
Well, but that's true of anything. If you're a savvy trader,
true.
I mean, you could.
But the volatility of Bitcoins is crazy right now. So I just wonder if the volatility of it continues. And if they have like options on the CME or the SIBO, that would probably be, I mean, you could probably make a lot. Or on the other end, you could obviously lose a lot.
Well, you could lose a lot. And your point earlier is the amount of money people have to put down. Now, things change very rapidly. So if I'm wrong about this, I mean, just someone correct me. But my understanding was that each contract you bought would be as if you were leveraging 5 Bitcoins.
On the CME.
I'm
on
talking
the
about
SIBO, I think it's one contract.
Okay. So on the CME, when the futures contracts go live, if Bitcoin, to explain to people how that kind of works, let's say you were to buy Bitcoins at 15,000 and Bitcoins were to drop 3,000 from 15,000 to 12, which that just happened from nearly 17,000 to 12,700 in the last few days. So if Bitcoins took that kind of move, then your contract could wipe out you could be wiped out. If you had enough money to cover that contract, you could be wiped out in one move like that.
So for people listening that don't know how the futures markets work, so that $15,000 or a $15,000 Bitcoin, and then you'd have to multiply that by 5, if I'm correct. So that'd be like $75,000 worth of Bitcoins or the contract total. And they're saying that you have to put what, 40 some percent. So yeah, you could lose a lot of your margin.
Yeah.
As you're
So
saying.
right. So if you were to put 40%, and you're talking about I'm old. What's the math on that? That's 30 grand. Is that right?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, you could put 30 grand down, and Bitcoin moves $3,000, and you go to sleep and you wake up and you're down half your money in one afternoon, and that kind of volatility. Now I'll tell you where it's interesting. Here's an interesting play on this. If all you wanted to do was own some Bitcoins at a certain price, let's say you wanted to, and it didn't matter, you didn't care what the price was, you just wanted some Bitcoins. Well, now you'd have to have a pretty big wallet to do this, but you could buy 15, you could buy a Bitcoin if you want to, and you have to buy 5 Bitcoins, I guess. Yeah, you buy 5 Bitcoins and then sell short a contract on the CME immediately. The moment you did that, your Bitcoin would be sort of locked in. So if all you wanted to do was to freeze your Bitcoin and stop the volatility, that's one thing that you could do. And of course, Wall Street hopes you do that because they like to scrape a little bit out in the middle for literally doing nothing. And that to me, I don't want to get too much on a rant here about Wall Street and scraping money out, but I mean, that's just amazing to me. Not only with Bitcoin was it not true that they were going to be free. We now know that one of the largest problems is transaction cost. And not only were bankers not going to be afraid of them or hate them, because Blythe Masters, famously now for almost 5 years, has literally been the head of many Bitcoin startup companies. Who knows how much money she's made on Bitcoins already. Not only can you not trust Jamie Dimon, who on one side of his mouth says Bitcoins are going to end terribly and they're fraudulent and all that, but then the other side, JP Morgan is going to be actively playing in the futures market and probably is buying and selling Bitcoins right now and probably mining them. Not only is all of that going on, now they're going to convince people to, instead of buying Bitcoins 1-to-1, it's a better idea to pay Wall Street for the opportunity to buy them on leverage. Isn't this
Right.
the exact
And just
opposite?
imagine this. You know, all the stories about blight masters and manipulation of silver. Just imagine if like Bitcoin crashes down back to $1,000. What are you going to see on YouTube? I've seen like 20 channels on YouTube with way more subscribers than I do and views. They're just going to talk about the same thing they talked about gold and silver. They're going to talk about manipulation. And then Max Kaiser on his show, he's going to talk about blight masters is manipulating Bitcoin, and JP Morgan's out in the futures market shorting, they're naked shorting and all that stuff. You're going to see the same exact thing.
Right, and the thing is, they're going to be correct. That's all going to be true when they say those things. But you can know this in advance. And the problem I've got is that Bitcoins were supposed to be different. I mean, Bitcoins were supposed to be the opposite of all of this. But instead, they are literally now the darling of all things fiat. It is amazing to me all the philosophy that's gone by the wayside as prices moved higher. I would, look, we haven't talked about this. Maybe this is for another discussion, but if you wanted to convince me that something would be called money or used for transactional purposes, then the price of that thing ought not to be an issue. The utility of the thing ought to be an issue. But I don't hear anybody talking about utility. In fact, if you read article after article, Bitcoins are slow. They'll never work as money, both in the alternative and the mainstream media. That's what they're saying. People in the know who are actually architects of this say the same thing. We haven't even talked about the Bitcoin forking that's going on and all this. Everything that Bitcoin was supposed to be, it literally was not. And instead, we now know, like everything else, Bitcoin was not different. And to me, it's always going to be exactly the same thing. You're going to be told in the beginning, it's different, it's different, it's different. Once adoption begins, all that moves aside, and then you get to where we are now, and it's all the same. And I'm actually philosophically disappointed. I was rooting, hoping that Bitcoins would be different. As much as I've been opposed to Bitcoins philosophically, I was hoping it would be different this time. And instead, here we go tonight. Wall Street's going to start scraping some out for literally doing nothing but convincing the SEC to let them do it. So congratulations, little guy. Bitcoins are now in the hands of Wall Street.
Yeah. I just can't wait till tonight and the weeks to come. You're going to see Bitcoin trading limit down frequently.
Well, you know what? I don't know where. I mean, I don't know where it's going to go in that way. I will pose this question for people. And why don't, can you and I play a quick little game here?
Okay.
Okay. So look, if I have a Bitcoin or the representation of a Bitcoin in a wallet somewhere, and it's at 15,000 or wherever it's at right now, Bitcoins are valued in dollars. Fair enough. If you give me $15,000 and I give you the number in a wallet, who has the value in that transaction if they're valued in dollars?
Who has the value?
Yeah, who has the value?
The person that's given to, right?
The person. Okay, if Bitcoins are valued in dollars and you give me $15,000 and I give you the Bitcoin, who's got the value in that transaction? You have it. I do. And literally speaking, with Bitcoin, it's not like gold or silver that can at some point even be used for a paperweight if you want to. It's not like there's any other use. You are literally going to have to find somebody else who will give you at least 1 penny more for that Bitcoin. That's what I honestly am trying to wrap my mind around, what people are buying when they're paying someone for the Bitcoin that they're buying. And it concerns me that this is a serious, legitimate question I just don't see a lot of people talking about. And in fact, anyone who asked about Bitcoin, let's be honest about this, 99.9% of everyone you talk to today about Bitcoin, if they're asking about buying it or selling it, they have no idea what they're buying or selling. I mean, no idea. And I'm not being sarcastic and I'm not being flippant about this. I'm saying most people have zero clue what it is they're buying or selling. You, Rahul, you do. I may have an inkling of an idea. And there are people out there who are experts who know exactly what's going on. Most people know nothing about it. And I would say to anybody listening, if you're going to buy something or sell something, at least educate yourself into what you're buying or selling. And at this point, I don't think most people have any idea what Bitcoins are or are not.
Yeah. One last thing. I did say this a few times, but this was an interesting thing. I don't know if you noticed that. Remember that Ranting Andy guy?
Yes, I know Andy Hoffman.
Right.
Used to work for Miles Franklin. Was pushing people into silver at 50, and then in the last year or so, I think he sold all his silver and began to tell people to buy Bitcoins. I believe that's the story.
Right. So I don't know if you know this. He went on the SGT report, and this was when he was employed by Miles Franklin. And he just had a temper tantrum. We've seen this temper tantrum a few times. I've witnessed it myself. But anyways, he was saying like, oh, it's all conspiracy theory BS and blah, blah, blah. And then during that conversation, he was talking about, I still like precious metals, but I'm way more interested in Bitcoin. And after that interview, Miles Franklin no longer had a relationship with Andy Hoffman because of the things that he said in that podcast. And long story short, he then, I believe, he started his own newsletter regarding Bitcoin right before like the initial pump up. And it just seems weird that you go from gold and silver. Yeah, he still talks about it. And now he's like full into Bitcoin with his newsletter.
Well, I mean, this is, again, a philosophical thing I'm sad about, because I believe silver and gold, I believe platinum, aluminum, copper, zinc, brass, bronze, I mean, whatever. Wheat, soybean, corn, all of these hard assets have a value that will eternally have some value in some way, shape, or form. As long as we're alive, there's someone on the other side who will want those things, and I think that's important. Philosophically, I just think it's a very important part and aspect of why you want to own things. And a lot of the folks out there now that are Bitcoin proponents have walked away from those things. And when it comes to precious metals, I mean, I don't know, you couldn't make this story up. I mean, the very people that at the top were talking about $500 silver. And,
wasn't it $50,000 gold, Mike Maloney, or was that $50,000 silver?
Okay, well, there's a video that Mike Maloney did in April or May of 2011 where he talked about gold would go to quadrillions of an ounce. And he said that even in a deflationary spiral, $50,000 an ounce. Just go look up Mike Maloney's silver from April of 11. And
Oh, wait, sorry to interrupt. I just saw a video on YouTube, a title, Mike Maloney, Can Bitcoin Go to $50,000?
Huh.
So
It could. I mean,
it could have the way that it's going now.
yeah, it could. But philosophically speaking, what I'm talking about here is not whether the prices have been gotten wrong or gotten right. It's that philosophically speaking, these are people who argued vehemently against Bitcoin. Not just that gold and silver were good, but in the case of Andy Hoffman, I remember hearing him, and I sincerely believed him. I want to be clear about this. If people listen to what Andy Hoffman said about Bitcoins, he made a very strong case for why you would never want to touch them. And all these guys talked about this in such a sincere, I think, an honest manner. Now, some people might argue, well, they were just talking their book because they're precious metals dealers or whatever. That's possible, but I do believe that you don't get involved in precious metals unless you have some belief in them. Precious metals is not something you wake up in the morning and go, what am I going to sell today? I know precious metals, because those are markets that go through years of downtime like we've seen recently. And yet, the philosophy seems to have changed now. And it seems to be, I'm sad to report, about chasing price. As for me, I'm chasing value. You can argue all day long, I should have been putting my money into Bitcoin. I tip my hat to those that did that. Over any 20, 30-year period, over the last 10,000 years. Well, certainly in the last recorded history that we can look at. As long as anyone listening to me right now has been alive, you can't go 15 to 20 years without outperforming with precious metals. I don't know about Bitcoin. Let's see where they are in 5 or 10 years from now. But the philosophy that seems to have changed, it makes me sort of sad, because I think a lot of those guys had audiences which believed in the philosophy. And I think, and I'm sorry I'm going long on this, but I think you have to have a foundation, a philosophical foundation for what you believe. And with Bitcoin, it seems like now that that's taken off, people love it. Now, Andy Hoffman's credit, when he started his newsletter, Bitcoins were at about 5,000. They're now at 15,000. So that's tripling your price in a couple months. So I guess if you were buying Bitcoins at 5,000, Andy Hoffman certainly made up for any of the price moves down in precious metals, I guess. But on the other hand, I don't know how many people were buying Bitcoin in the last couple months. So who knows? But you do have to say scoreboard on price performance for all of those folks. Even if you disagree with them philosophically, you have to recognize price performance they got right. Now, here's the question I got for you, Rahul. When are any of these guys going to say it's time to sell? Now, it's a very important question, because the volume in Bitcoin is so small. The transactional volume is so tiny compared to any other market you can think of around the world. What will happen if a bunch of these guys decide it's time to sell? You could see prices plummet.
The thing is, I wonder how many bankers own Bitcoin, and suppose they were the ones buying it up. And now we're seeing SIBO and CME coming up with these futures contracts, and now they could easily hedge what they own. I'm just thinking, like, would they just dump it and then the price just not collapses, but you just see how it came up, it goes back down.
This is 1:22 or 2:22 Eastern time. I can't see without my glasses, but say it's 2:22 Eastern time U.S. on December the 10th, 2017. So whatever the time is right now, I would not touch Bitcoin futures, options. I wouldn't do nothing with Bitcoins as the futures market opens up trading today. No way. I will get out some popcorn and watch it and hope someone makes a ton of money, and I'll just congratulate them all the way to the bank. I'm not touching Bitcoins today.
I'm not touching them either.
I think one way or the other, you could be radically wrong today and pay for it financially.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But anyways, Don, before I let you go, how can people follow you now? You doing VidMe videos, or I don't think you're on YouTube anymore.
No, I'm not on YouTube. VidMe shut down. I don't know if you know that or not, but they shut down.
Oh, it did? Oh, I didn't know that.
Well, they supposedly by the 15th of this month, you have to go to their site. They posted something about it. But no, I don't. No, nothing to follow.
Oh, okay.
Just hanging out.
All right, man. Let us know if you do have something, and then we could tell people to go to that.
Okay. All right, man. Well, I appreciate you having me on, and you're one of the guys who you're one of the most honest and logical guys out there. I love listening to you, and I appreciate the fact that you're keeping it real. So, and by the way, congratulations. You're a year of being married now?
Yeah, I've been married for a few years
A
now.
few years. Wow, time flies. So,
Yeah.
so congratulations on that. Is it everything you hoped it would be, or is it better?
I mean, it was challenging at first. Never lived with a girl before. I mean, besides my mother, but that doesn't count. But yeah, it just you transition after a year or two. You get used to it.
Yeah, well, my wife and I are celebrating our 20th anniversary this year.
Oh wow,
So
nice.
yeah, we have. I don't know how in the world we've stuck together this long. Marriage is it's hard,
Wow.
man. I mean, it's you meet somebody and everything's great, and then what you don't realize about life is you're going to change over time, and so it's sort of a negotiation you have with your spouse. Are the changes acceptable? And do I accept your changes? And are we going to honor the contract? And those are three important questions. But I'm happy to report that 20 years of marriage, we're still together, honoring the contract and happy with the changes. So congratulations to you, and hope you can
Thanks.
make it 20
And
years.
congrats on your anniversary.
Thanks, appreciate it.